Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCGPLAYER affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, on today's episode, the topic is, should all reserve list cards be banned? No. Okay, well that was an easy episode. Nice and simple. Wait, you're still here? Okay, fine. I guess I need to give a little more context. So there's been a lot of talk about the reserve list lately with buyouts and price increases of Commander staples that are on the reserve list. For example, Gaia's Cradle nearly doubled in price pretty much overnight. Now, for those of you that might not be too familiar with what the reserve list is, I'll give you a quick breakdown. The reserve list is a list of 500 plus cards that are never to be reprinted. So that means no reprints and also no direct copying a card and just calling it something else. You can't just take Gaia's Cradle and call it Steve's Cradle and it does the exact same thing. What you can do is have a reprint that's a somewhat functional reprint that has a slight change. So Gaia's Cradle can't be reprinted and Steve's Cradle can't be made, but you can have something like Itlama Cradle the Sun. It's a functional reprint that's kind of like Gaia's Cradle, but not exactly like Gaia's Cradle. Yeah, let's go with that. Anyways, if the reserve list is such an issue, why was it made in the first place? I'm going to try to give a quick overview, and I'm sure I'm going to misspeak on a thing or two, but just bear with me. Wizards made this promise way back in the 90s, and it made sense when they did it. From my understanding, they essentially had a huge reprint set which tanked the value of certain cards, and many collectors got upset. At the time, making this promise to the players that certain cards wouldn't be reprinted made players believe in the value of their cards over time. So creating the reserve list in the first place very well might have saved Magic. There's no way to know that for sure, but at the time it seemed like a great decision to make. Regardless, at a certain point, I believe it was the Arcadian Masks, they decided not to add any further cards to the reserve list. Magic had gotten big enough essentially at that time that it didn't need to make that promise anymore for future cards. Now, Wizards has also tried to get around the reserve list in some instances by reprinting things as foils. The logic on this is that a premium product version of a card technically doesn't break the reserve list. Regardless, doing so upset collectors again. And because of that, Wizards seems to have backed down from exploiting that loophole. But for a while now, the concept of the reserve list has come under fire and many players are calling for it to be removed. Reserve list cards are really only used in Commander, Legacy, and Vintage. And with the growth of Commander, it's not surprising that the demand for these cards has increased. But because they can never be reprinted, the supply will never be increased, and basic economics means that the price is going to skyrocket. And that price can definitely be increased very quickly, like in the Gaia's Cradle instance. When speculators from the MTG Finance community buy out cards, it's going to rise even faster. For someone in the MTG Finance community, it's a much safer buy to buy a card that's in demand on the reserve list. Because it's never going to be reprinted, the price is never going to drop because of an increase in supply. So as long as Commander stays popular, the value of those cards is only going to continue to increase. So again, many Commander players are asking Wizards to remove the reserve list. In doing so, they could print as many copies of these expensive cards as they want to make them more affordable for players. Now, it's up to debate if Wizards ever will, as there are potential legal issues that might crop up with that, and I am no lawyer, and that's a discussion for a different day. Regardless, this episode came about because some in the Commander community are saying that if the reserve list isn't going to be removed, then the cards on the reserve list should be banned. And I very much disagree with this concept for a few reasons. Reason number one, the reserve list cards are not needed to play Commander. Gaia's Cradle is great, but you don't have to have one in order to play Commander. In a competitive format like Standard, yes, there are certain cards that you absolutely have to have in order to compete. But Commander is a casual format, and I think that this channel is proof enough that you don't need expensive cards to make a powerful deck. You can make an insanely broken and powerful deck on the smallest of budgets. For those of you that have heard me talk about my Joyride deck, it was only $25 when I built it. And it's a deck that I rarely pull out because of its power level. And because it can easily become a game of solitaire and I can take 10-minute turns and that can be boring for other players, but that's beside the point. The point being, the Commander format is unique in that you don't need expensive cards in order to play it. It's a multiplayer, singleton, and casual format. The multiplayer aspect helps when one player gets too far ahead, the rest can knock them down. So if one player's got a Gaia's Cradle out, they're probably going to be a target. The singleton piece of the format means that it's less likely for them to get that guy's cradle in every single game. That's going to be 1 out of 100 cards versus in standard where you can have 4 out of 60, or basically 1 out of every 15. And the casual part of Commander is that the goal is to have fun. Now, this actually brings me to point number 2. For most Commander players, Commander is a casual format, but there is a competitive side to Commander as well, and that is the CEDH part of the format. The only level where reserve list cards are absolutely needed to play is CEDH. So in CEDH, if you don't have a specific expensive card, that can definitely hurt you. So therefore, the fact that reserve list cards are becoming more and more expensive definitely affects those CEDH players more, doesn't it? Actually, the CEDH community is very accepting of proxies because of that incredible barrier of cost. So you can buy your $400 Mox Diamond, or you can proxy it for basically free. So even if the price of Mox Diamond continues to rise because it's on the reserve list, it won't affect CEDH players as long as they're still okay with proxies. But now let's go into my next point with number 3, lack of accessibility doesn't make a card ban worthy. There are plenty of expensive cards out there that are not on the reserve list and are not banned. Should Mana Crypt be banned for its price as well, even though it's not on the reserve list? And who determines the price cutoff then for legal cards? What happens when a card's price jumps over the price cutoff? Does it just get insta-banned? Or what happens when it falls below that price, then does it become legal again? Banning because of accessibility does not seem like the right direction to go. Although you could argue that the Rules Committee has already done this by banning the Mox and not banning Sol Ring because of accessibility, but that's a different argument for a different day. Regardless, let's move on to my last point though, which is simply 500 plus bans is a ton. Currently, there are only 40 or so cards currently banned outside of Silver Border and such, so that would expand the list an incredible amount. And with this kind of a decision, there would be plenty of collateral damage. Yes, there are plenty of expensive reserve list cards out there, but there are plenty of cards on that list that will never get expensive no matter what happens. So it's pretty pointless to ban those. Maybe it's not a very powerful card, but it works in a very specific deck and someone's using it, and then it just gets banned out of nowhere. And if the entire reserve list gets banned, there are 60 commanders on the reserve list, so goodbye to those decks. And 2 of those cards I've actually even owned decks for with Feldergriff and Selenia Dark Angel. And how could you ban something as cute as Feldergriff? He just wants to give you hippos. In all seriousness though, do I want the reserve list removed so that the expensive cards on it can be reprinted and made more accessible? Of course I do, I am all for reprints. But just because that might never happen, doesn't mean that you say that no one can play with those cards. Calling for all the reserve list cards to be banned is more than an overreaction in my opinion. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this topic are. Should the reserve list cards stay unbanned, or should they just ban them all? Yeah, so just let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.